Today, I'm joined by Angelo Pizzo, the legendary Indiana screenwriter behind Hoosiers and Rudy, two of the most iconic sports films of all time. His work has earned Academy Award nominations, recognition from ESPN and USA Today, a permanent place in the Library of Congress. Pizzo's next project, The 500, tells the story of the first Indianapolis 500 and could complete his accidental Indiana trilogy. Today, we're going to be talking about growing up as a Hoosier and then creating the movie Hoosiers. It's iconic. We all know this. I'm really excited. We're also going to be talking that next week, Angelo's coming to town. He's going to be talking at TEDSports. It's going to be incredible. So he's going to give us a little sneak peek about what we can expect there, but you're going to have to hear more about it next week at TEDSports. Angelo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Man, I'm really excited. So we learned a little bit. You are not born, but raised in Bloomington. Then you spent some time in a few other places, and now a boomerang back to Bloomington. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, I mean, obviously, we want to get into talking about Rudy, talking about Hoosiers. Those are two iconic films. How did the process of bringing a movie about the state, around the state of Indiana, around basketball, to life? How did that go? How do you even, where do you start when you want to bring a movie to life?
This is an idea that David Anspaugh and I, who was the director of the film, we were fraternity brothers. We talked about the various films that we thought could be shot in Indiana. This is when we were both film buffs, but not film majors. And we both end up going to the grad school at University of Southern California in film. And I got a job in a series of jobs, ultimately 6 years of what they call development jobs or executive jobs, working for various studios and production companies, working with writers, directors, really learning how to make movies because there's so many different aspects to it. Not only just the craft part of it, but also the politics and knowing just how to speak the different language of people there in LA. And at that time, everything was centered in LA, not so much anymore. Yeah, I mean, I ended up working with some great writers and directors and producers and actors and learned about how to make a movie before I set out to write my own. And it was just an experiment. I was going to I figured, I'd worked with so many writers, I'd read so many screenplays, but I kind of always wanted to try my hand at it. And so a company I was working for was transitioning between allocation of their assets or their investments from what was Time Life Films, it ultimately became TriStar and HBO. And I had offers of a job to either place or to take a 6-month parachute paycheck, which I did. And I went off and I wrote Hoosiers. Since I'm trying to compress the story as much as I can, there was a 3-year gap between when I finished it and when we started getting it made. And we probably faced a couple hundred no's along the way, rejections left and right. And that's the nature of the business, quite frankly.
Well, if you face 200 no's, right? Like specifically, what was the yes that you felt like, okay, this movie's going to happen?
My version of yes, not that yes, we like it. There were a number of companies. Well, yes, we like it, but we'll help. Go out and try to raise money to make it. The only yes that matters is someone with a paycheck, a checkbook, or the ability to say, let's make this movie. And it was a smaller company. And the odd thing about this company was that the person who said yes had never seen a basketball game. He had never heard of the state of Indiana. He was British, not well educated. And I say that with all due respect. He just didn't go beyond high school. He was a boxer and a soccer player and a kind of a hustler kind of guy. And he had collected through means of which I'm not really sure, a bunch of laundered mafia money from credit Lyonnais, and he started making movies because movies was his passion. Somehow he read the script and he started crying. And he had a rule, if a movie made him cry, that he would have to explore making it. And the reason it made him cry was not because of anything other than the fact that his father was an alcoholic and that he would often walk on the pitch and complain to the referees. So when Shooter, the scene with Shooter and his son, and that whole through line of that story, it was like that was the reason the movie got made. That's how
Wow.
crazy this business is. You never know. We had Gene Hackman attached as the actor for one whole year, and everybody turned us down. And to the point where this financier didn't want Gene Hackman. He wanted Burt Reynolds, and Burt Reynolds said yes, and we actually killed that by having a meeting with him and making sure that he didn't want to work with us.
So you're telling me the reason that the movie Hoosiers was made was because this British financier who had an alcoholic father resonated so much with the movie that he cried.
Yeah.
That isn't talk about, yeah, that's a crazy industry. What I need to know from you, where did you first hear the story of the Milan Indians?
I think growing up in Indiana, everybody hears the story. I mean, it's the classic state folk myth. And if you have any interest in sports, and particularly basketball, I mean, every paper in every small town or big town would trot that story out at the beginning of every year. And especially during single class system, I think in part it was to make, these smaller teams, give a sense to them it was possible, that anything was possible. So yeah, I mean, everybody I knew about the story.
Did you play high school basketball?
No, I wasn't good enough.
Ain't that the truth? Me neither. Wow. So you get the paycheck, right? You can make this movie come to life. How does bringing a movie, had Indiana ever had movies? And how much of the filming was done here versus other places?
There had been movies shot in Indiana, and the most recent one was Breaking Away. It was actually shot in Bloomington, and that was in 1978. So, the there weren't tax rebates and tax credits, and that's changed the game. That's why Indiana has no movies now and never will until they do. In our case, yes, we shot everything. 100% was in shot in Indiana.
Wow. How did you land at the Hoosier Gym in Knightstown as the spot?
We did location scouting, for I mean, at least a month before we opened our offices here, and we were trying to find the town that had everything: the exterior of the town, the school, the interior of the school, and the gym. And we actually found the place that was perfect. It was called Waveland, Indiana. But unfortunately, they were tearing down the gym and the school, or maybe it was just the gym. But yeah, we actually went before their town board and said, could you please hold off and let us shoot here? It would be perfect. And they, I think they just, with a lot of skepticism, they looked at us like, what? You're making a movie about that? I don't think it ever sunk in that that we were real, and we did not make a compelling enough argument. So
Wow.
they went ahead and destroyed the school while we were filming in other places. So what we did was we did a combination of three. We couldn't find a town that had everything, so we found the exterior of the town in New Richmond, which is right outside of Crawfordsville, and then exterior and interior of the school is was in Nineveh, which is near Camp Atterbury, and of course the Hoosier Gym in Knightstown. And we love that gym. It has a lot of character, and the extraordinary thing about it is it looks exactly the same 40 years later. I mean, they've done a great job in keeping it in pristine quality.
Were there any other gyms that were finalists to be involved in the movie?
We had to find other gyms to play the sectional and regional, and we always knew we were going to shoot at Hinkle. But I really don't recall. I think we did the game. Not I think I know it's St. Mary's Catholic School. We shot that. What's where Shooter walks onto the floor for the first time. No, I don't remember any finalists.
Was there a thought to take the movie to Milan and shoot like where the history had happened?
The practicality of having to shoot a movie is that you need a crew base, and you need a place where everybody stays, and the offices, and you have to be able because one of the bigger expenses in making a movie is housing the people that work on the film. And with our budget, we are only allowed a little more than a couple handful of people that we had to bring in. Now, if you shoot in Milan, then you have to house just about everybody because it's away from Indianapolis. So we used so many local people there. And our charge and what was demanded of us was that every location had to be within 45-minute drive time of Indianapolis in order for us not to be on the road forever and lose shooting time and not having to house people. So, yeah, we couldn't shoot in southern or northern Indiana. Everything had to be around Indianapolis.
As you went through production, were there any moments where you just like looked around and like, how the heck is this happening in Indiana and in Indiana basketball? Like those moments that just that you look back on and are just so fond of.
When you make a movie, and certainly this being our first movie, it's such a all-consuming, exhausting process. And we had a lot of trouble with Gene Hackman at the beginning, who kept on complaining about, how his career was tanking and he had to end out of desperation. He took this job and he didn't respect us. And it was hellish. I think that the word that best describes my experience on the movie was survival. Just trying to make it day by day. I just don't remember ever not being tired. And I don't even know how we ended up doing what we did. We just kept on facing crisis and problem after problem. And somehow we were in the God loop or something. If we didn't fix it, it got fixed somehow. It's a miracle that any movie gets made. It's a double miracle if any movie gets made that turns out well, or turns out like you intended it.
At what point after it was released did you know you really had something here?
It was not after it was released. Our final cut was 2 hours and 28 minutes long, and we didn't get a great response from the studio. We got mixed, generally supportive response from our friends and family, but you can't count that as, that doesn't mean anything. Our first test screening, and test screenings are you recruited audience out of a shopping mall, basically, what it comes down to, who have no vested interest and know nothing about the movie. And it was in Irvine, California, and there was 200 people from that who recruited from that shopping mall. Sure, it was the most extraordinary experience that I think I had on the entire movie. Not only did they laugh and cry and at the right places, and there was a standing ovation, and more importantly, they gave us the highest score in the history of Orion Pictures, which was the distribution company. We scored a 95, which is real. And David and I knew we had something. We had that we had a movie that resonated with the audience, that worked for an audience. So the financing company had an overall deal, what they call a put deal with Orion Pictures, that they had to release 3 pictures of theirs over a 3-year period. And this was their picture that they put forward for this year. And Orion didn't like the film and they didn't want to release the film. They didn't like the script. They were never supportive at all. And they hated the title. In fact, they insisted on their own title, which is The Last Shot. How awful is that? Well, the reason they said they were going to overrule Hoosiers was because Hoosiers was not translatable for the foreign market, etc. They also insisted that we release the film at under 2 hours because those are the days where you had turnover of three. They wanted 3 screenings of their films a night, and that's when it mattered. With a 2.5-hour movie, that's only 2 screenings a night. At any rate, so after we walked out of the theater during that screening, that successful screening, the president of the company turned to us and said, "All right, you can have your stupid title. I'll give you that. You still have to cut a half hour of the movie." And he said, "We're not going to even give you notes. You obviously know what you're doing, so you figure it out." So David and I went, and we, it was a couple of excruciating weeks of getting that last 30 minutes out.
What did you have to cut from those 30 minutes?
So in the 20th anniversary, they did a special double DVD release. MGM now owned the rights to all their Orion pictures, and they said, "Would you like to do a director's cut?" And of course, we were thrilled. David was thrilled. We were thrilled. The problem was that the company, by the way, the financing company had gone bankrupt, which was not a surprise. And they had sold the negative of the film. It was probably guitar picks now. We actually found a rough cut. When I say rough, it was actual film. It was in the garage of the editor's garage, and it was all scratchy and it was a mess. In order to pay the lab cost to fix it, it was exorbitant, and they said no. So what we did in that second DVD was we took those 30 minutes and we did an audio commentary and talked about each one of the scenes without having them be cut in. It started off about 5 years ago because we really tried to push, well, the technology really got more sophisticated and cheaper and making that stuff work in terms of fixing the images. So we kept on pushing them, pushing and pushing them, and they kept on saying no until Gene Hackman passed in the spring. Hoosiers was the number 4 stream film the week after he passed, and they said yes. So David has just completed the new director's cut. Not all of the minutes are going back in because we kind of, re-examine them. And there's some things that we, from our perspective, now 40 years ago, 40 years later, we thought, didn't work. I'm just really thrilled. It's probably, we didn't put 10 minutes back in. We actually cut a scene, okay, that we never liked. And but I think the film works better than ever. I think it looks great. It sounds great. We have the great Jerry Goldsmith who did the scores for both of our films. His orchestrator is doing, finding stems and cuts of music to orchestrate the new stuff, and it's a better movie than it was, and it will
Wow.
be there. The MGM is thinking about re-releasing it theatrically in selected areas, but at the very minimum, it will be on by Christmas. It will most assuredly be on Amazon Prime.
So by Christmas, we'll be able to watch the 2 hour and 20-minute director's cut of Hoosiers re-released.
Yeah.
Wow. This is unseen footage that that the public has not seen before.
Unless they bought that 2 discs, DVD in 20 years ago.
But then they would have heard the commentary, not actually seen it, right?
We showed the scenes, but we talked about the scenes before, and
I got you.
we described why, it was out of context. It's not cut in the movie, but we talked about why we ended up cutting it, and I think in matter of degree, how much we missed it not being there, because some of the things is like we're really unhappy it's not in the movie, like how does Buddy get back on the team? I mean, that's one of the questions that people asked me because he was kicked off the team. All of a sudden, he appears all of a sudden later in another, scene without explanation. Well, we had a scene where he comes and asks the coach to come back to the team. So something like that's in there of course.
Man, I'm really excited to watch. That's going to be on the Christmas list this year for sure. You talked about that moment in California when everyone gave you the highest score of an Orion picture, right? Like
The audience, we knew the film worked for the audience. Part of how a film becomes successful in the marketplace, theatrical marketplace at the time and still today, how much is the studio going to commit to spend on publicizing and marketing it? And Orion did not want to spend anything on it, and they still did not believe it was going to play nationally even after that California screening. So we had to prove that the film worked in Indiana first, because if they were hoping the movie didn't work in Indiana, so they wouldn't have to do a national release. So we opened on 110 in 110 theaters on Christmas weekend or Thanksgiving weekend, a month before, and of course we did pretty well, and which gave us the right to gave us the opportunity for them to open nationally. With it wasn't a big release. It was like I think 600 theaters, and then it actually did well enough. They started building. They started adding theaters, and it was still in the theaters 4 or 5 months later. So those were
incredible.
those days. Movies are not in the theater 4 or 5 months.
No.
I don't care how good the movie is.
Yeah.
It's streaming by that time.
Well, you took the success that you had from Hoosiers and you rolled that into your next film, which is iconic I'm from Northern Indiana. I have a bunch of friends who are lifelong Notre Dame fans. Let's talk briefly about Rudy and where you first heard the story of Rudy Rudiger and how that came to life.
Well, the first time we heard about it was through a friend who was the basketball coordinator. Rudy went up to found out that he was connected to Hoosiers, and he felt that we were the guys that make his story. And so the story got back to us. I said no, I wasn't interested in it. The 3 reasons I said no were: one, I didn't want to do another sports movie set in Indiana that going to talk about nichify me, you know. Number two, I grew up in Bloomington, and I had a friend whose father was extolling the virtues, the glory, the tradition of Notre Dame football to the point I wanted to kill him. Rooted against Notre Dame all my life. I did not like Notre Dame, and I even had I shouldn't say this. I had a relative who was a Notre Dame grad who was so arrogant about it. He kept on talking about that he went to God's university. I can't tell you how much that just pissed me off. I'm not doing this movie under any circumstance.
So you, the writer of Rudy, did not like Notre Dame.
I've said this publicly many, many, many times in my life. In fact,
That's crazy.
I think I've said it so many times that since we made the movie 35 years ago or whatever it is, I've never been invited back to Notre Dame. Ever.
No way. Ever?
The Alumni Association invited us back for one event, and that was it. But the university, no. I've never been invited. We've never been invited to see a game, to speak in front of the student body or the class. Or the funny thing about that is they have student orientation week for freshmen, freshman orientation week, and they screen the film like every night.
No way.
The last night they screened it at the stadium.
If the University of Notre Dame invited you on campus, would you go?
Absolutely. I have nothing against them. Listen, I've grown to appreciate Notre Dame. It's a special place. It really is. It's unique. And I'd never been on campus before, and it had any reason to go. But when I started doing research, I started seeing it. It was important for me to see that campus, that university, what was special about it from Rudy's point of view in order to be right authentically.
How did you go from no, I'm never making this movie to creating this movie and it being iconic?
Rudy, who's fundamentally incapable of hearing the word no, never let up when we said no. I mean, he even flew out and tried to talk me into it in person, but I kept on saying, no, 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 no. Then it was 2 years after he first talked to us that David Anspaugh, the director of Hoosiers and my, partner there, we had a little company at that time. He was talking to two producers about a baseball movie that he wanted to do. Or no, they wanted him to do a baseball movie, and then they started talking about sports stories. And so David spun this Rudy yarn, and these guys went nuts because they had just had lunch with the president of the studio, Columbia Pictures. They just had lunch with him, and he told them that one of his great disappointments in his life was being turned down by Notre Dame. That was his dream school. And he ended up going to Michigan State, but he had Notre Dame paraphernalia and football stuff in his office. He said, if we can't sell it to him, you will never sell it to anybody in a million years. I said, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to write. He said, please just go and sit because your team, they're not going to do it just for David. They're not going to do it. Just sit there, okay? So I mean, normally I would pitch. The writer pitches, right? So I went in Frank's office, and I didn't think it would. I never thought it was a commercial idea. If you reduced it to like a sentence or a paragraph, it sounds banal. So I went and sat, and David did the pitch, and I was shocked when Frank Price leaned over and said, "I can't wait to see this movie." And I walked outside, and I just was, oh my God, I can't do this. And they basically threatened to beat the shit out of me if I did not do it, because the deal would be busted if I didn't say yes. So out of friendship, I got on the plane and flew to South Bend, spent time with Rudy and Notre Dame, and tried to figure out how to write it.
Wow. I mean, it's like iconic. There's a lot of like talking. How much of it was obviously dramatized for that, and how much of it was like truth, the real story? Like this, did they really lay their jerseys down for Rudy so he could be a part of the team?
Be truthful, if not to the letter of the truth, then the spirit of the truth. So, example, the jerseys. What had happened was a number of the seniors, when he wasn't on the dress list, a number of the seniors went to the defensive coordinator, and Rudy played on defense, and offered their jerseys up to let Rudy dress in their place. I just thought it would be much more much more of a visual correlative to see it, and see it in that way, rather than have couple people walk up to Joe Yanto, hey, Rudy can dress for my place. It's not as dramatically and visually as compelling, but I feel like we kept to the spirit of the truth, if not the letter of the truth.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love it. I know we're getting close on time. I do have to ask, what can we expect from your appearance at TED Sports next week?
What I'm talking about in my 13-minute little talk, and there are a lot of other activities, which I'll get to the second activity in a second, but what I'm really going to focus on is, the fundamental principle of what guides me in terms of my work in this business, which is so very difficult. What I've learned, and I'm tying it directly into Rudy. And I'm doing it in this way, which is the fact that Rudy was the story I wanted to write the least was the most important script that I ever wrote, because it was my story, and I didn't realize it at the time, because to me, one of the problems for me going in was it felt a little bit cliche, the little engine that could, the little underdog that chased his dream. I didn't want to write a chase your dream story. But what I did find that was so incredibly aligned with my own journey was that Rudy had what it took that I learned I had to have and didn't have at the beginning, which was I was told these three things, at the very beginning, and I didn't live them. I didn't know how to live them, which was, when you try to make it in the film business, it's like diving into a sea of no's, swimming toward an island of yes that you don't even know exists. And even when you climb out on an island, it's going to start sinking. That's number one. Number two is you can never let anybody define your work or who you are within the context of the business. Once you personalize rejection, you're done. You're finished. And I struggled with that, And then the thing that I found in Rudy was that he's that guy. He's the guy that is like the third principle was, if you're rejected, you will be constantly, 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 and you don't personalize it. You have to be like one of those bozo dolls with the sand in the bottom. You bounce right back up. Rudy did not give away the power of someone defining who he was, what he was capable of, and what he could do, and even though all the odds and all the kind of facts, would guide a normal person away from chasing this crazy dream, he took it upon himself that this was what he needed to do. And those are the people who are successful in my business, because you will live in the sea of no's.
That's incredible. Angelo, I've really appreciated this time. We're excited. You're going to be speaking at TEDSports Indianapolis. That's September 9th through the 11th. People can grab tickets. Shout out to our friends at Sports Tech HQ for making this introduction. I do have one final question for you that we ask every guest that comes on the show. This question is, what is a hidden gem in Indiana?
The Indiana dunes, and how extraordinary the dunes are, how beautiful they are. That state park, and we had our family had a summer cabin up there, and we would go up there every summer. So to me, the dunes are a special gem that are worth visiting every single for all those people in southern Indiana who just like to go to Brown County, and which I love, by the way. Brown County is beautiful. And McCormick's Creek and so on. But yeah.
That's a great one. Hey, Angelo, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you. We're really excited. September 9th through the 11th at TEDSports Indianapolis. Go grab your tickets now, and we'll talk to you soon, brother.
All right. Thank you.